First, for our co-host Paul Hollis, author of the Hollow Man series, owner of Hollow Man Publishing as a co-host, and our host of Fridays with Frank Fiore. Frank, how are you?
I'm doing fine. How's everybody else?
Hey, we're fantastic. We're ready to kick it off with our first guest today, and it's Dr. Irene Daria. She's a cognitive developmental psychologist and author of "I Didn't Believe Him." She also and reading tutor for kids of stars including Kate Winslet, Kate Blanchett, Philip Seymour Hoffman, and Tom Brady. Oh my goodness. Dr. Irene, thanks for stopping by.
Sure. Thrilled to be here.
How did that happen? Okay. So let's first talk about your background. Then I know Frank's going to ask questions about the celebrity thing. How did you, kind of get going in what you do, and how did that start?
It actually begins with the story that I tell in I Didn't Believe Him. So I Didn't Believe Him is the story. It uses my son's story as a window to show exactly how schools have turned millions of kids into struggling readers. It takes you behind the scenes of a really well-regarded school to show exactly how that happened. And it also takes you behind the scenes of my family's life, because often you read these terrible, reading statistics, and they're sort of just statistics. They're easy to ignore, or they don't apply to my life. And I never thought that I would have a child who wasn't taught how to read in school. I'd been a journalist and a writer before I went back to grad school to become a psychologist. So the book sort of shows the personal story of what's happening to families all across the country. And it shows how my son suffered because his school wasn't teaching him to read. It shows the worry and and exhaustion that I felt when I realized, oh my God, I have to be the one to teach him, because at the time we could not afford to hire a tutor to work with him. It shows the stress that it put on my marriage and on marriages all across the country. And it shows how it impacted my older son, because he was sort of ignored because I was focusing on Eric. So the book tells that story. And just, a little bit more about the book, early reviews are saying it reads like a novel, that it's entertaining and informative, but also horrifying and inspiring. And all of that actually answers your question, because all of that happened. In my heart, I couldn't allow, or felt like I needed to do what I could to help prevent that from happening to other families. So I first began, I never thought I would have a tutoring company. I own a K through 12 tutoring company in New York, and that's how I came to tutor, various children, including the children of the celebrities that you mentioned. Never thought that would happen. The way that happened was, at the time of the story of I Didn't Believe Him, I was quote unquote just a mom. And moms and dads never underemphasize what, your role in your child's life. But I was just a mom. I had no idea how kids learn to read, and needed to figure out how to do that. And I was in school. I had decided to change careers from being a journalist to being a psychologist. And I began researching what's going on with reading in our country. And much to my surprise, learned that millions of kids have been labeled learning disabled, not because there's anything wrong with them, but just because their schools haven't taught them how to read. And I thought, oh my God, that's really horrible. And I wanted to do an article about it, didn't have time. So my local library in Greenwich Village in Manhattan was having a presentation on how kids learn to read. And I went to it. The librarian told parents, well, your kids will be learning phonics in school. And I raised my hand and I said, not necessarily, because that's what's happening in our country. Kids are not being taught how to sound out words. They're being taught to guess the words from pictures. And I described what happens to children when that happens. They're not like us. They won't raise their hands and say, I don't understand. They will either become behavior problems, or they will move to the back of the room and hang their head in shame because they can't read and they don't want to be found out. They'll sort of hide. And a mother came up to me and said, what you're describing is exactly what's happening to my daughter. Her school isn't teaching her how to read. They're sending home all these books with big words in them she can't possibly read. And now they're saying they think she has ADHD. And the mother said, well, if I thought she did have ADHD, I would do everything in my power to help her. But I think someone just needs to teach her how to read. And will you do that? So I worked with this little girl over the summer and really felt like I had saved her academic life. And I thought, you know what? This feels great. as a developmental psychologist, instead of stepping in grade 3 when maybe it's too late to help children, because it's very hard to break habits when schools are really teaching kids to read the way struggling dyslexic readers do. I thought, let me help prevent that problem from happening. And I began tutoring other children, and that's how Kate Winslet came to me. The same, my son. So, and I didn't believe him. It tells the story. It's called I Didn't Believe Him because he came home at age 5. Neil, age 5.
My goodness. Okay. Well, I'm going to stop you for this is such a great story. And, but Frank has a question because we have 15 minutes in this interview. Okay, good, Frank. I'd love to have you back again, by the way. So you're very interesting. I have a lot to say. We'll go Frank with you and then Paul. Go Frank.
Yeah, she's amazing. They're very dynamic. Listen, what do you think is the biggest obstacle that you have to confront with somebody, a child that's having problems reading? And what's the first thing you attack, so to speak?
You take a look at what curriculum is being used in the school. You see, is the child being taught to sound out words, from left to right? And is the teacher actually doing specific, explicit step-by-step lessons? Most schools use a method called balanced literacy, which has a sprinkling of phonics or has a separate phonics component now because things have changed a little bit. Some good news is happening in the country, but not in every school. Some schools, they will be teaching phonics as separate lessons, but when it comes to reading lessons, they're still using these little pattern books that have repeated words on the page that kids can very easily memorize, and pictures to cue them into what those words might be. So a lot of children are being taught to read by guessing from the picture, by using context, and by using only the first letter of a word. And that's actually how dyslexic children read. So the first step is see what's happening in the school. And as you'll read, and I didn't believe him, it's not so easy to get a school to change. So parents need to help their children immediately. And they should take steps to teach children how to read. I'm not sure if you guys know this, but I've actually also written a series of workbooks that parents can use to teach their kids to read themselves. Takes them step by step through the whole thing. And I have a website called Steps to Reading that has a free video, free resources. Just watch that video and you will learn how to teach a child to read. You don't have to buy my books. Just that information is there free for you. Take a look at that video. You'll see what you need to do and really go forth and do it. You have to take immediate action or your child will really, really be feeling terrible in school.
Okay, Paul, go with your question.
Yeah, hi, doctor. I'm actually the last person you want to ask anything about education, but since I was a kid, I've had this concern about education and how it all kind of works and fits together, and whether where the fault lies, and you always get the French salute. It's just like somebody else's problem, and I'm wondering how you can get parents more motivated, because right now I think most parents see school as a babysitter, right? So how do you get them involved?
I'm going to respectfully disagree with that. I think parents are very, very concerned about education. I actually volunteered. I taught teachers how to teach reading at an elementary school in Harlem. And I saw, there's this stereotype, of maybe lower socioeconomic families are not involved or they don't care. And I saw the complete opposite. And there's actually been studies done that Black families are much more likely to help their children, want to help their children with homework. So I see the opposite. I see parents blindly trusting their children's school and not being aware that there's a problem. And I think the problem lies in the fact that report cards do not reflect what a child knows. There was a study that was recently done and it found that 78% of parents believed their kids were reading at grade level,
Yeah.
when only 28% of them
And
were.
it's because it's teaching to a test. And that's where our biggest issue is teaching to a test. That's probably why I'm out of the business and probably why I stopped tutoring after COVID. And I had a tutoring business and I was done because of how much of a challenge the process is. And they continue to teach to a test. The teachers are only rewarded based on what their test scores are. And it's not, hey, can they really perform in the most important things that are going to make them move on to life to go on to college? And that's the mistake that we're making in education. So it's definitely the other end of things, in my opinion as well. I completely agree with you. And I've been an educational advocate and everything and education and one-on-one education, especially with AI now, we really can change the way we teach kids. We can do so many more things now using AI to customize, tailor lesson plans and do all these cool different things. Things can be much different. Don't you agree that we can really finally start to see more growth in the competencies for kids and individualized instruction versus group and full classroom?
Yep, absolutely.
And that means by, going back to the one room schoolhouse, which we've talked about and going through this whole process we went through for so many years, smaller class sizes do improve student performance. Kids being more individualized instruction improves kids' performance. It's simple, but it's got to spend the money. And you got to get out of that one room, that factory mentality of education, or kids are going to be left through the cracks. That's
Right.
it.
Right.
And I know when to talk about African-American families, I taught at a school called St. Agnes, which is an Extra Mile Foundation school in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And those parents were so involved. They wanted so much. I think that we have a problem. Paul is right. When you're talking about certain socioeconomic, but you're talking about the ones that are the furthest behind in education and they're dying to learn and they're shut down. And then their only option's jail in a lot of ways.
Right. Yep.
Okay, best place we can find information on you, purchase your book and learn more about you. Where can we go?
My website is stepstoreading.com. The book will be available on Amazon. I Didn't Believe Him will be available on Amazon on August 20th. The Steps to Reading workbooks are currently on Amazon, but stepstoreading.com, my website, gives you all that info. It has links. It has lots of free resources. Again, it has that video that free, how to teach your child to read, really everything that parents would need to know to help their children.
All right. That was a special simulcast of the Neil Haley Show. And